If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. Hello and welcome back to the second episode of the Spidey Cast. It's been 3 weeks, and I have not made episode 2. So here's the plan. On the weekend, I'm going to premiere these episodes. I may record them and edit them beforehand, because I do edit this podcast, because there would be a ton of rambling if I just went off the cuff by myself. So they have to be edited. They need to be concise. So it is going to be slightly edited. So last week, we talked about my beginnings as a nerd. Now we are going to talk about what makes a good zombie game. I've talked about Dying Light on the channel before, and I've had videos about Cod Zombies, not about it, but there's old playthroughs you can find where I'm like really young. I'm probably like 15, 14 when I did those. Very cringe. Don't recommend you watch it, but if you want to torture yourself, like you can watch it if you want. It's old content on my main channel, of course. I'm talking about my main channel, Spidey Seth. That is my main channel, link in the description if you really want to see it. But this is my new start. This series is a fresh start. This is a fresh start for my channel. I want to kind of go back to the old days of my channel when I used to talk about content, but I want to do it for a longer time because I feel like when I make those short videos, they're not as good. I'm not going to lie. I can't watch them. I can watch them now, but they're not nearly as good as this stuff. I prefer long-form content that's timestamped. It's timestamped. And yes, there will be timestamps. Now, because of YouTube's janky system, you may have to look in the description for them if you want to see them. So I'll probably add this part to the beginning instead of the end because people are going to need an explanation as to what this show is about. Okay, on to the topic. So we got atmosphere as the first bullet point that we're going to talk about. So I'm going to start with old Cod Zombies. Not BO1, not BO2, not BO3, not Cold War, not BO6, not BO... Every Black Ops game, it is not any of those. We're not going to talk about any of the Black Ops games. We're talking about World at War Zombies. The beginning. We're taking ourselves back to the beginning of the series. And we're looking at Noct. I'm not going to say the full name because the pronunciation would be really bad if I tried to pronounce German words. Noctur and Toten. There you go. That's the best I can do for that. But so we're not going to talk about the level design. I'll just give you a quick rundown. You have 3, maybe 4 rooms. One of them has a mystery box in it and wall weapons on it. That's the second room. The first one just has wall weapons and a ton of barriers you have to rebuild if you're into that sort of thing. And then the top floor has a sniper in the cabinet, and you can use it to snipe from the window. Snipers aren't that good in that game, but, you know, what can you do? And the mystery box gives you a random weapon every time. One of the benefits of old CODs, especially World at War, was the fact that the atmosphere was a lot darker, grittier, very, very, very warlike atmospherically. It was very oppressive. It really fit the tone of a World War II game. It wasn't like green and beautiful looking. It was dark, gray, gritty. It was brownish in hue like most games were back then. Same with Black Ops 1 Zombies. It very much carried the tone of World at War, which I really liked. But Noct is no exception to this rule. It very much has this eerie tone and atmosphere. Even the concept of it is scary. So you're trapped in this dark, eerie, dilapidated bunker in the middle of Germany. You know, you crashed your plane here, and you're seeing these creatures with yellow eyes and rotting gray skin coming after you. And the darkness that silhouettes them, like it makes a silhouette. The shadows that are cast make such an eerie silhouette on the zombies. And it was a perfect introduction to the series. Honestly, Noct You couldn't get a better introduction map for any series, in my opinion, for zombies, other than maybe No Mercy from Left 4 Dead, but we'll get there. So for the second map, ending our discussion on Noct. So Zombies was popular enough to get a second map. It was becoming a series because people really, really liked it. They had no clue this was going to be a thing. You have to keep that in mind with Zombies. They had no clue that this wasn't just going to be a little side mode on the campaign that you can play for a little bit on one game. But they believed in this mode and made a second DLC, and it paid off. So, Verrucht, the mad lads at Treyarch, decided to make a map where you're trapped in a mental asylum. So the context for the zombies being there is a lot creepier than the previous map. These guys are essentially mental asylum patients that have become infected with this Element 115 virus. I'm not going to get into the lore of zombies because that's a whole other thing. I could get my friend Graham. He's been on videos in the main channel. If you watch the robbery video and the RC Cola video we did, he's there. We're young, though, so it's cringe. But anywho, there's a lot more of a creepy context for these zombies being here. Like I was saying, mental asylum patients. Now, did they have the resources or time to actually make them look like that? No. They had to reuse the same models they used from the previous campaign. This was back in the day when all they had was the generic Nazi outfit. But the concept is still there. It's very eerie. It's way creepier than Noct. Just being in a mental asylum. Plus, they even introduce a atmospheric effect in the gameplay. So if you play 4 players on this map, which you can in basically all these games that I'm going to talk about tonight, if you play this map with 4 players, you spawn in 2 separate rooms. Both of the teams, you're isolated from each other, so you have to make your way back to each other in these eerie, dark corridors in this really cramped level. It's extremely cramped. Yes, it's bigger than Noct, but in some ways, you don't have as much space to run because they're mostly corridors. And throughout these corridors, you can see this like gothic architecture, this eerie gothic architecture. It's kind of like Arkham Asylum in a way. I wouldn't say as good personally. I think Asylum is the king of atmosphere, but this was a perfect second level to complement Noct and in some ways improve on it atmospherically. You can see chipped paint on the walls. You can see a dentist chair with blood all over it, and if you crouch down and hold the X button, if you go fully prone, you'll hear screaming. Like, it's very intense atmospherically. It is kind of funny. Me and my friend used to do that just to laugh, but in actual context, it's a lot more creepy than I originally thought it was. There's this orangish hue in the level, like it's orange-brown. So the other one was more gray, blue, brown. This is orange-brown. So we got that classic, like, you can tell. Even Dying Light does this effect. It's got, like morning is usually comforting. The colors are like yellow, like the sun. This is very afternoony, but it's almost sickly. Sort of like the Zombie U game, where it has like this greenish hue. You know that there's been an infection here. It's very foggy, just like Noct. It's very something. Obviously, this place is not right. We're left with a very claustrophobic level with Nazi flags in it. It's very, very oppressive atmosphere-wise. Probably the most oppressive map you're ever going to play in the series, to be honest, because the goofiness kind of starts to amp up as the series goes on, and it gets more over the top and actiony. But this was where it was at its peak atmospherically. Then we move on to Shinonuma. It's a very greenish, swampy, gross, dilapidated feel again. Got that same fog. The water in the mud slows you down during gameplay so you can't sprint. So you have this hectic feel to the game where you basically just can't get away from the zombies and you're forced to fight them. You can't just run away and hide. You have to face them head on. And you have a dead guy, John Banana, that's his name in the lore. You have him parachuted through this hay bale looking top of the building. It's like a barnish kind of thing, like a foreign barn. It's hard to describe the building, but it's very obviously it's not American or any recognizable like architecture. It's probably like Chinese because of the name Shino Numa. I'm assuming it's Chinese, but I could be wrong. But you're in this swamp. There's fog everywhere. There's a couple buildings you can go in, and that's about it. And you have to run between the water. So you're basically getting slowed down every time you run into the water. So, and all you have to really help you is this zip line system where you can bring this down and go up on this little zip line platform thing. It can bring you up back to the main building from the swamp. So that's nice. But it's also very eerie. The dead body of John Banana through the ceiling is definitely the very first thing that shows off the oppressive atmosphere. World at War maps were very good at this. And like I said, it's a lost art in zombies. The buildings are called huts, and the name is Japanese, so it's probably like Tokyo. I said Chinese. Like, I don't know any Japanese. Like, I barely know any. I know Watashi, which means I, or Watashi, if you really want to talk like a Japanese weeb. But it's a very good map. I think it's underrated. I think all the World at War maps would be very high on my list if I was ranking them. But we're moving on from Shino Numa. They're very simple maps. There's not too much to describe, but there's still something there. They're more simple than the other games I'm going to talk about. So then we have the most revolutionary map in the series, Darice, the introduction of the Pack-a-Punch machine, and the 4 perks from Verrucht, Juggernog, Quick Revive, Double Tap, and Speed Cola. All of those were carried over. So this is a big deal. We're in the big time. Zombies is actually going to get off the ground. We're finally ready for the legendary series to actually begin. We got ourselves an eerie, sickly blue hue, very light blue turquoise hue to light the map. And then we got these brick buildings that look amazing. These torn up brick buildings in this research science center. This was Group 935's main base of operations. The people who researched all this crazy stuff, teleporters, Pack-a-Punch machines, and even Element 115. So this is a big deal in the story, because before this, there was barely a story at all. Yes, there were dialogue lines that sort of gave you an indication of it, but this was the first map with that crazy story-based stuff. So this was a big deal. And just like the previous places, this place is falling apart. It's barely holding itself together. There's rubble everywhere, fiery barrels of gasoline. And then we have the biggest kicker. So to get the Pack-a-Punch machine to open, the classic weapon upgrader that makes your weapons extremely overpowered, depending on which ones you get from the box. So there's randomization on top of that. But the worst part is the fact that you have to activate these teleporters that are timed. And if you don't get all these teleporters activated, I believe there's 3 of them. I almost said 4. It's been a long time since I played this map. You have to link all 3 of these teleporters to the Pack-a-Punch in order to get the upgraded weapons. And if you screw up, you gotta redo it. And for the time, this was a very difficult challenge. I'm sure if I played it now and actually tried with World at War Zombies, I could do it, but I have not, and I would like to do it someday. These gameplay choices that they make in Verrucht and in this, with the split players in Verrucht and the teleporters here that you have to link up, these add tension because you're facing the zombies. If you're not a smart player, you're not going to leave one zombie alive. You're just going to leave all of them alive. And you're probably fighting all the zombies while doing this. So imagine all those factors combined. Perfect, stressful, really, really fits the atmosphere of this tone. It's very, very eerie. I cannot say it enough. Darice is an amazing map. So now we're moving on from Zombies. Zombies was kind of my first introduction. I was introduced with BO1, but I had the World at War DLC. So I experienced these maps like everybody else. Not the OGs. My friend Graham was an OG. He grew up with World at War. He played that version. And part of me wishes I could have had that experience. Part of me wishes that I could begin at the start instead of at like the BO1 days. I love the BO1 days. They're really fun. They're nostalgic. I love the campaign and multiplayer. That was when COD was amazing. But we'll talk about the downfall of COD in another episode. This is not about COD Zombies. We'll do an episode on that. Instead, we're going to move on to Left 4 Dead. Now, this game has to be the creepiest game I've ever played. The Left 4 Dead 1 maps are still eerie to me to this day. They're still extremely stressful to play because of how oppressive that game is. That game nailed atmosphere. In my eyes, why am I saying stuff so weird? In my eyes, this game nailed atmosphere way better than COD Zombies did. Now, I do like COD Zombies a lot, but I associate it more with an arcadey type of game. Very arcadey. I love it, though. That's part of why I love that series. But this is different. It is still arcadey in nature, but this is like the horror is cranked up to 11. It's cranked up so high for me when I played this game, especially the first time, and even now it's still creepy. What better place to start than No Mercy? This is easily my favorite level in this game, and one of my favorite levels in a zombie game, period. This level starts you out in the middle of a city on top of an apartment building where you're trying to make it to Mercy Hospital. The helicopter pilot is warning you that the nearest evacuation site that hasn't been overrun is basically that hospital. And you know hospitals are bad news in these types of games. They're never good. But you got this blue hue, this dark, oppressive blue hue again, but it's even more effective in this. The first thing you're greeted by when you enter the building and go down the stairs is dozens of hordes of common infected. They're the most basic enemy in the game, but in a pinch, they're tough. They are annoying to deal with. They will swarm you, and you have to get them off of you. They'll be around you in all directions, trying to claw at your face and bite it. So you really have to get them off you. You have to melee them off of you or shoot them off. And they take health down fast. So you got to take them out quick. Because the special infected, and we'll get there, are way tougher than these guys. Shout out to Wolf Clock, a YouTuber who covered the atmosphere of these games. But you can see that the refrigerator's empty, there's no food in it, there's clothes all over the floor, and there's a dead body on the bed. Like, it's very eerie. The sheer amount of infected that are all over this place just goes to show that this virus is so contagious that no one could prepare for it. This is week 1 of the infection. Week 1. Think about that for a second. And I learned that from the game's trailer, the first game's trailer. They have a cinematic trailer that describes all the characters and shows off all the special infected. It's intense. You can tell that this virus hit and no one expected how deadly it would be. You can see posters that tell you to wash your hands, wear a face mask, and they're all from CETA. They're basically the CDC of this universe. And they're warning people, hey, do all this stuff and you'll be okay. And big surprise, didn't help at all. At all. So your goal each level is to get to a safe room. And in this one, there's eerie writing on the wall, as with all of them. The lore and storytelling is very strong in this game. At least when it comes to the infection. The characters are as flat as can be, paper thin, which is annoying because that could have been super cool to see a deeper story with Left 4 Dead. I'm mad that cutscenes were cut from this game because players complained, oh, I have to see this all the time every time I play it, or it's too discouraging to see what happens at the end. It's like, dude, it's fine the way it is, okay? I'm not going to go in great detail about all the graffiti on the wall that the survivors write that got to the safe room before you. However, I will highlight ones that I believe are interesting and relevant to the discussion. So, the most interesting one to me is the one that describes the entire city being overrun. And a lot of times you'll see writing with loved ones trying to contact other loved ones or people listing off the dead that were in their group. It's very eerie and oppressive. Like, it's extremely oppressive. But the most oppressive thing in this entire level is that there is another evacuation center that CETA made called the Hewlett Recreation Center, and it's X'd out because there's a poster that tells you to go there. They crossed it out, the survivors that were there before you, and said it's overrun. So the first evacuation center in the area is overrun, and no one's there. So you know you're alone. There's not going to be anyone to bail you out of the situation. This is the end of the first section of the first level. There's 4 sections in each campaign, or possibly more, sometimes less. They change it up sometimes. We're not going to go over every section of each level because that would go way over the time. And this is not a Left 4 Dead episode. This is a What Makes a Good Zombie Game episode. We're going to cut to the hospital, which has the finale and one level before it that takes place in the lower levels of the hospital. So this is the big part of the level. To me, this is the most interesting part of it. So at this point, we've encountered all special infected. Tanks, witches, smokers, boomers, and hunters. Tanks are, as the name describes, they're giant zombies that throw rocks at you, and they're like muscle-bound like crazy. Smokers are basically people that smoked too much and got cancer, and the cancer was accelerated by the virus, and they get like boils all over their face, and they have tongues that they can strangle you with. It's pretty weird, but it's creepy, and they make these like terrifying coughing noises. And they have like a weird green fog around them. And then we have witches. Witches are easily the most annoying and they're the most creepy in some ways because they sit down and they're like a crying woman. They kind of trick you into thinking there's a woman crying on the ground. And then if you startle them with your flashlight, they kill you. They claw you to death. But they're tedious. Sometimes the game will spawn them in your path. It's that cruel. And they take a ton of shots to kill. Same with the tank. The tank can throw you around, though, which makes it a little more annoying in some ways. But the boomer is also... All these are annoying, but the boomer explodes his bile from his stomach acid on you. He's a fat infected. He explodes it on you, and then zombies are attracted to where the bile is. So they'll just... You'll have common infected just run in, and like dozens of them come in and start trying to kill you, and they're annoying to deal with, and your screen has the bile all over it until it clears up, so you're kind of disoriented too. And then we have the hunter. Those guys pounce you and claw at you. They're very animalistic and very dangerous. They're guys with hoodies, and they have like their face covered, but their eyes are red and kind of bloody, as with all the zombies, but they're pretty scary. So you have to deal with these while also dealing with common infected. And you can imagine that gets pretty hectic. And with every playthrough, the director AI spawns all of them in randomly, which is pretty stressful. So you can't camp or else these things are going to find you. Courtesy of Wolf Clock, the graffiti in this room basically describes that these people are immune to the infected. And they're, setting up meetup times with their friends, describing that some of their crew are immune. And they're also listing off their kill count for zombies, showing that this whole situation is kind of becoming a norm in Pennsylvania. Fairfield, to be exact. This place, this hospital, is extremely dark. It's darker than any room in this level, minus the sewers. There's some lights here, but it's very far and few between. So visibility is reduced even more. Then you have police tape and bodies all over with blood on the ground next to these hospital beds, contaminated blood packs. You can tell the infection started in this building, which makes it the most eerie place. One of the first rooms we see is a hazard containment room with one body in it. And this could have been the start of the infection. So they were able to contain this guy. But unfortunately, everyone else was infected and it was too late. So this might have been patient 0. And you can see the tragedy of this situation where no one was able to predict how bad the virus was going to get. And by the time they discovered the gravity of the situation, it was too late. And in the final safe house of the level, we get the most eerie part of the situation. So they mark a timeline of how long it takes for the infection to basically infect someone and turn them into a zombie. It starts out at 4 days. Then it goes down to 2.5 hours. Then it goes down to 5 minutes. Basically, there is no hope for the city and probably the survivors. So after fighting through insane amounts of hordes of special infected and zombies, the survivors finally get to a helicopter and escape. But then the pilot gets infected. And then Zoe, one of the female characters on the group, because you have Bill, Zoe, Lewis, and Francis, she shoots the pilot, and they crash land in a level called Crash Course. So the plans have changed. I'm going to give Dying Light its own episode, I believe. I think that game deserves its own episode for the story it's telling. So the rest of this is going to be Left 4 Dead stuff. So sorry, Dying Light fans. We'll get to that in the future. It's in between Death Toll and No Mercy. It was a DLC that was released later to bridge the gap. It's the shortest campaign. It takes place during the aftermath of the helicopter crash that Zoe caused. Francis even says some actual funny lines about it. Sometimes the characters have personality, but a lot of times the lines are so rare that it's kind of annoying. But regardless of that complaint, you're in a weird, eerie, small town industrial complex with warehouses. There's military bodies all over, showing that the army's kind of struggling to contain the infected. So the tension's ramped up a lot more in this level because you're starting to see that the greatest military, the American military, is falling apart at the seams to this virus. These are America's most elite professional soldiers, and they're fighting an extremely unpredictable enemy that can turn their own ranks against each other. So that's pretty stressful, having to contain all that stuff in one area. There's a bridge with vehicles all over it that I'm assuming connects it to Death Toll, and you can see cars all over the place, scattered, abandoned, on this bridge, proving that they were not prepared to evacuate in time. And a lot of people got left behind during this infection. And the sheer panic of the situation basically made it so people tried to just cram their cars on both sides of the road and get through the blockade to make it to safety. But a lot of them couldn't. So in the safe room, we have a lot of meme-worthy dialogue that's trying to mimic internet forum posts. There's like poetry, people making fun of poetry. It's very funny dialogue, but I can't get into all of it, just like Wolf Clock couldn't. We can see that the paranoia has become a lot more apparent because certain survivors are telling other ones to not tell the people they're with about where they're going or what their plans are. So the virus is sowing a bit of mistrust in these people on who's infected. Now, maybe I'm reading between the lines, but I'm just saying, it's interesting stuff. We got a guy named Peter basically telling people that the military is in Riverside. That's where the evacuation is, so they got to get there. As we go further, we have dead bodies in shipping containers all over the place, kind of proving that a lot of the people that wrote stuff on this wall did not make it out alive. Some of the bodies are all ripped up and mangled, showing that tanks probably got to these people. It's very tragic. So in this finale, you have to keep this generator on that keeps restarting while hordes start constantly attacking and special infected start attacking in this small little warehouse-like building as you're trying to get on this truck's ramp that's lowering slowly. And once it lowers, you escape the level. But man, this is a tough finale from what I remember. I died quite a few times here, and it's very hectic having all those zombies constantly show up. There's more of these events in the game, but like I said, this isn't just a Left 4 Dead episode fully. We have the zombies part at the beginning, and we're already at the 30-minute mark, so I gotta speed up a little. Now, Death Toll is a lot more familiar to me because I don't live in some city. I live in more like a small town, so it's a lot more like my actual home. So you start out in a very heavily forested area by a police car. So the truck has ran out of gas, and they're walking on foot in the forest. The sky is blue again. The hues are blue, very similar to No Mercy in the previous map, Crash Course. The forest is a perfect place for the infected to ambush you. So you got to keep yourself on your toes, or else you'll be dead. And you get this nice sign that says, "Welcome to Riverside." So our survivors have finally made it to the evacuation center that the military set up. We got more crashed cars over a bridge that's over this very small area where a dam is broken. Yet again, panic has set in and people are desperately trying to get to the evacuation center while the infected are also attacking them. So I understand why they're panicking, but in this situation, you gotta have a level head and try to work together if the person's not infected. But basically, it's an impossible situation. No one can really survive it, but somehow our survivors do. Spoiler alert. The fog is also extremely thick, so you basically can't see the infected that well. But our survivors go through this road tunnel that's extremely claustrophobic. It's big enough to have multiple infected in it, but considering the amount, it's extremely claustrophobic. So they have to make their way through that terrifying tunnel that has cars blocking everything. So people were really panicking. Then we go down into a drainage system, basically a sewer. The paths are even more narrow. You can see blankets and luggage and clothes under these sewer pipes down here in one of the big rooms. And it shows you that these people were staying the night in this place, which imagine how terrifying that would be. Staying underground with those things chasing you. We have the corpse of a soldier who's trying to lower a bridge so he can get across and get to the safe zone, or at least closer to it. Then we make our way to a hole in a wall that's been broken by a tank that crushed a dude under the rubble. We can see a little boxcar safe house that is inside of this warehouse that's through the hole in the wall. Then when we go into the safe house, we see the most depressing part. So the army's left Riverside and a place called Newburgh. I don't necessarily know where Newburgh is. I don't know if anyone does. Maybe some lore expert can tell me in the comments, but this place is overrun too, and the military left. So these people who are left behind most likely died who wrote this stuff on the wall. We also see that one of the people who wrote on the wall tried to take an infected person with him. Not the best strategy, my man. There's no cure for this virus. And just in case any of this is confusing, in the safe rooms, I'm talking about graffiti on the walls. These aren't literal scenes in the game. It's all just extra lore added into the background. The next part of the chapter involves the church, and a lot of players, including myself, enjoy this level a lot. I mean, I like all Left 4 Dead 1 levels, but this is an iconic moment in the game. So, before we get into that, a lot of the locale is very similar to, like I said, a place I'd live in. It's a more forested area. It's more suburbsy, mixed with like small towns. It hits close to home for me, seeing all these bodies around and all this stuff. It reminds me a lot of home, and that's what makes it so creepy to me. It's a lot more like where I live now, as opposed to when I was young, like I discussed in the previous episode. It's a very backwoods area. So that's what reminds me of where I live now. So we make it to the church in this small town that's next to a graveyard. Pretty creepy place. A lot of infected all over it. And the worst part is, there's a crazy guy who locked himself in the safe room and will ring the bell if you talk to him, summoning even more infected and multiple hordes. And we have Nathan Vetterling doing the best performance in this entire game as the church guy. This guy was recently bitten and trusts no one. He thinks he's immune. It's been an hour since he was infected, and he's freaking out. He trusts no one. I repeat, no one. A woman went in there, he trusted her, and she bit him. So he's pretty spooked. So he decides to do the crazy test, ringing the bell to get the infected to fight you, to make sure you don't turn. And the saddest part about this whole situation is obviously that this guy is infected. He would not be acting this way if he wasn't. And the transformation scene, the voice acting is phenomenal for this guy. You'd have to play the game to hear it. I'm not going to play it on this podcast. Play Left 4 Dead and play this level. Obviously play the campaigns in sequence, but remember if you get to this level, because this is a standout moment. Then we have this eerie jaunt through the woods where we make it to a boathouse, which is where the finale takes place. This was such a difficult finale, I actually had to Google a solution to finishing it. That's how difficult it was. I died so many times due to freaking tanks constantly showing up out of nowhere. They would spawn them repeatedly. The hordes would just keep showing up over and over. So finally, when the boat shows up, you escape the area after an extremely stressful section. You have to go in the boathouse and gear up, and then I had to go by this rock that was far away from it, because in the boathouse, it's so claustrophobic, and the infected just keep smacking me from behind. I had to go to the right of the house and wait by the dock where these two rocks are and stay next to there to correctly fight the infected and have enough distance to be able to kill them off without getting destroyed. You can see a city in the distance, and that's going to become important very soon. So our survivors get on the boat and escape after they promise the Slaters, John and Amanda, who own this boat, that they'll provide them protection. Unfortunately for them, they're immediately kicked off the boat when they learn that they're carriers. See, carriers are infected people who don't transform that are secretly carrying the virus. So let's just say they weren't a fan of that. So they leave them at the city, starting my favorite campaign in the entire series, Dead Air. So we start in a greenhouse at an airport, and we see a burning plane fly by, looking like it's about to crash. It's a little bit eerie. Could the person be infected? Is that the reason why everything fell into disarray? Or did they just get unlucky? We don't know. But this time we're in big city territory. No more small towns with hospitals or woods with crazy psychopaths or industrial complexes in the middle of a random country area. We are in the territory of big cities. The sky is blood red in this level. Multiple buildings are on fire, and you can see smoke all over. This is probably the worst the infection has gotten. The level is the most oppressive looking one in the game, in my opinion. It nails the post-apocalyptic look to a T. You exit the warehouse, which is filled with infected, and you're going from rooftop to rooftop trying to make it to the airport. There are more dead bodies in these apartments. There are signs of people running out of food, getting desperate, knowing that the situation is even more hopeless than they could even predict. Now, we are about 40 minutes into the episode, so I'm going to rush through the rest of this stuff to finish this segment. And then we'll talk about some more general things about zombie games. We'll talk about different different aspects of what makes a good zombie game. Even more of them, not just environmental stuff. You'll see what I mean. The writing on the walls in the safe rooms is getting less humorous. People are talking about planes falling from the sky, most likely due to pilots being infected or malfunctions. People are speculating that the government made the virus and that they have a cure. This all culminates in the big finale. The plane that we saw in the intro crashes into the ground trying to make an emergency landing at the airport by the runway. Thankfully for our weary survivors, we have an extra benevolent pilot who's willing to help us leave this place if we fuel up his plane for him. Big surprise, infected attack you as you do this. So the stress is amped up to a very, very high degree. Miraculously, despite all these odds, our survivors are able to get into the plane and escape, with it all fueled up and ready to go. Then we hit the grand finale, Blood Harvest. Now this place really reminds me of my old hometown. You got a lot of nature in the form of big forests. You have barns, you have cows, cornfields. We go from the woods to industrial buildings, to tunnels, to train stations, ending with a farmhouse finale. We have graffiti mentioning that the army's still there, taking immunes with them. We have graffiti asking if anyone's left alive in the area. There's graffiti spurring the survivors on that we're playing as to get to the Rally Point Echo and escape the infected with the military. People are saying cell phones work in Riverside, which is overrun, by the way. And more devastatingly, people are saying that the farmhouse is overrun. The funniest part about this finale in this level is, to me, it was the easiest one in the game. The farmhouse has a lot of space to move around. The military pick up the survivors, busting their APC in, and they leave the area, ending the final level of the original Left 4 Dead's campaign before the sacrifice comes out. And we're not going to talk about that until maybe a later date. Left 4 Dead is a masterpiece in my eyes. Same with Dying Light 1, but we're 40 minutes in, so we're going to have to give ourselves a little conclusion. So, when you're working on a zombie game, you have to pay attention to a lot of things. Does the environment give us lore on the situation? Are the zombie enemy types varied and creepy looking? Do they have scary enough audio to back that up? Are the levels isolated enough? Does the fog, the hue of the lighting, and the colors of the sky, do these elements invoke a fearful element? Is the music scary enough to add tension to the game? Because Left 4 Dead's music is very creepy, and it's extremely subtle. And if you listen for it, the ambiance is horrifying. The sound effects in the background, you just get this eerie aspect that no game has beaten except maybe Dying Light. I haven't played many zombie games that don't have these elements. But if they don't, your game's going to fail. No one's going to care about it. It's just going to be generic. And you don't want a generic game, especially in a market oversaturated by indie games. Indie games that all blend together and use the same engines over and over again with little to no creativity. I'm looking at you, RPG Maker. No offense to people who use that engine, but there's a lot of shovelware for that engine. It's my problem with modern gaming. Every game looks the same, photorealistic. They have no style to them, no substance. I don't care if the game has humans that look so photorealistic I think they're real. In my opinion, I'd rather focus on gameplay, atmosphere, all that stuff. Visuals do not matter to me. Environmental storytelling, like Wolf Clock's video, which I will keep referencing, link in the description. Go there if you want to see more detail on this environmental stuff. That man took his time and deserves every bit of credit for the videos. But anywho, it's a big deal. Modern gaming has become so flat in the way that it's delivered. Remakes are so boring looking. They take classics that had style, that has substance. Look at Resident Evil 2. It's a generic, realistic game now. It's a third-person shooter. It could have been amazing. But instead, they had to take the route of popular gaming. They had to change the entire thing because they weren't confident enough that that genre of game could succeed. So this is my advice to developers. Make your games original. And if you're doing a zombie game, make me scared. Seriously, make the AI unpredictable like Left 4 Dead's Common Infected and Special Infected. If every zombie is exactly the same, nobody's going to care. It's going to get boring to fight the same enemy over and over again. And making them too strong, which, though I love Dying Light, on the hardest difficulty, and yes, it is on the most difficult difficulty. I love how I said that. But that game requires you to hit the things repeatedly. And it's very obnoxious. Even in normal mode, there are points where they are way too tanky, especially in the later moments of the game. Seriously, you do not need zombies to be that tough, especially the most basic zombies. The point of them is that they're supposed to be cannon fodder. They're supposed to be fun to fight. The other ones also mix it up and are entertaining to fight, but the easy ones allow you to have a little bit of a power fantasy. Like, I'm okay with being overwhelmed, but I would very much prefer that a game be balanced, and as much as I love Dying Light, it is not very balanced, and that's a fact. It's one of my favorite zombie games, period. I would argue it's better than Left 4 Dead. But Left 4 Dead makes zombie killing fun, not so hard that you want to pull your hair out sometimes. And the human AI in Dying Light, don't even get me started on that. They are impossible to fight on any difficulty above normal. It is absolutely ridiculous the amount of punishment that they can take. But regardless of that, that's all I want from a zombie game. I want a balanced game. I want it to be fun. I want it to be balanced. I'm okay with feeling overwhelmed and unable to fight the hordes, but you have to make it so it's actually possible. You can't just make one zombie be such a massive threat. I understand that increases the tension, but it's annoying. Biters in Dying Light are so annoying. Same with the runner zombies. They are fun to fight in normal once you have good weapons, but at the beginning, they are unbearable. And I do like that parkour is a thing in Dying Light to get you away from them. That balances it out. But my ultimate problem with this is, in some ways, I would like it to be a little easier. Not saying take out the challenge entirely, but make it fair. It does not feel fair when I am repeatedly hitting a zombie with a lead pipe on the ground and he's not dying. Even with a knife, there are times where they will withstand so much damage. Meanwhile, in Left 4 Dead, one shot kills a common instantly, depending on the weapon you have. And the weapons are scattered throughout the level. In Dying Light, you have to loot everything, and I love looting stuff in a zombie game. That fits the concept. You know, you're a survivor. Obviously, you got to go in convenience stores and gas stations and see what you can get. But still, give me the ability to use the base weapons on the weakest infected. Don't make them stronger as the game goes on. Maybe you can introduce variants of these infected that are stronger. That's fine, but give me an alternative. Now, Left 4 Dead's biggest weakness, in my opinion, is that it fully relies on environmental storytelling. That stuff is okay, but for me, I like cutscenes. I like linearity. I'm sorry. If you want to skip them, you can skip them. But I need a story to get me engaged in a game. I love Left 4 Dead's arcadey nature, and that's fun enough to get me through. But for me, it would be so much better if there was a actual driving force behind the things that I'm doing in the game. I'm so tired of just playing the game and having to look at the environment to analyze it. I think in some ways that's a weakness. You should use that to bolster the story you already have, not be the only story you have in the game. Story is a big part of single-player and co-op games, especially ones that are supposed to be single player games. I will never understand as to why they went bare minimum with it. Kyle Crane, and I'll talk about Dying Light for a little bit, but he is an amazing character. Just to give you a preview for the next episode that I'll make in October. That's not the next episode we're getting now, but this topic might be resumed in October since it's spooky season. But he's such a good character. His struggles are so compelling. The deaths of the characters affect him so much. His voice acting is top notch. Roger Craig Smith, hats off to that guy. He acted his heart out for that part. And my biggest problem with Left 4 Dead is these characters are so bland. They have no personality. All they do is have random lines that fire off at random moments. And I understand that makes every playthrough unique. What am I saying? I'm getting to the point where I'm mumbling. But it makes every playthrough unique, but you have too few lines. Most of them are dedicated to, ammo here, weapons here, them saying the characters' names. There's not enough banter, there's not enough character, and there's not enough personality to make them stand out. As much as I like Bill, Lewis, Francis, and Zoe, I do like them better than the Left 4 Dead 2 survivors, even though they have more dialogue. But still, I want to know more about these characters. I don't want to have to read a comic, the Sacrifice comic, if you're interested, to learn more about them. I want to know about them in the game. I want to know their backstories. What were they doing when the infection started? Give me more detail on what happened. Don't just force me to read external material to learn the story. That's the problem the Halo games had. They took villains from the games that should have been main villains in the main games, for 343 specifically, and put them in the actual games instead of books. So that you cannot do that in a story you're trying to tell, because not everyone wants to sit down and read a book or even a comic. If you're not going to give me a reason to care about these characters or build on their relationships extremely deeply, if you're not going to make it dialogue heavy, why should I care about these people? All they do is say a couple one-liners and then very gameplay-specific lines over and over again. In some ways, it's still the same problem. You're never going to have a completely unique game. You're going to have certain story elements be set in stone. This isn't a Telltale game. Dialogue choices aren't in here. They don't change the course of the story. You just have what you can get. And I feel like people should stop complaining about linear stories, personally. For me, that's the biggest draw for games. It just is. That's why I play them. It's like a book. It's like a digital book where I have gameplay in between. This is not taking away from Left 4 Dead, but this is offering some critiques. I still love that game, and I even played it yesterday. And I've said that before in the episode, but I'm going to emphasize it again. This game is so good. It is so good that I can replay it endlessly. This and Dying Light are my favorite zombie games, hands down. They tie. They're at the tippity top of the list. As much as I like Cod Zombies, it's too simplistic. All it is just a game. It's an arcadey mode. Yes, it has cutscenes. The story in some ways is too deep, but it's only told through pre-rendered cutscenes, not in-game ones. And the new story is embarrassing. At least we had it back then in BO1 to BO3. Now we have absolutely nothing. There is no story at all in the games. It's nonsensical. There's no connecting characters. There's no bigger arc. So all I'm saying is do what you have to do to make these things work, man. I just don't understand why you complain about a story in a single-player game. That's what single-player games are about, man. Certain ones I agree. There are bad ones out there, but why complain that a game has a story if it's single-player? Why? That's the draw. That's the hook. The gameplay and all the other stuff, the atmospheric stuff, that's just dressing. That's side stuff. The primary thing is story. And if you disagree with it, it's fine, but I just feel like you really shouldn't be playing single-player games if you don't want a story. Go play a multiplayer game if you want a repeating experience. But if you want to play a solely single-player game, just play a single-player game. Like, you don't have to mix the two. Story is important. You know, in this day and age where our attention spans are being shrunk daily by all these phones and all these YouTube shorts, why can't we just sit back and appreciate a good story? Can we get back to those days when good stories were the primary means of single-player games? Why do we have to have games without it? In this day and age, we have access to so much stuff. In my opinion, too much stuff. So why don't we take the time to sit down and enjoy a story? Come on. Just sit down, play a single-player game, watch all the cutscenes, read all the dialogue, and just soak in the world. Trust me, it's fun. It is, in my opinion, the greatest aspect of games. Obviously, games with good gameplay need to be like gameplay needs to be important, but so does story. That has to be an element. You can't just skip on it, in my opinion. You cannot. You have to make it good, and you have to make the gameplay good too. It's like a PB&J sandwich. You got to have it be good. They come together like PB&J. Story and gameplay. The rest of the other stuff is just side stuff. If those aren't married together in a well-made way, no one's going to care about your game. These games are very influential in my eyes. Even Dying Light, as underrated as that game, Dying Light 1, yes, it's overwhelmingly positive on Steam, but it's not nearly as played as much as Left 4 Dead. These games are the cornerstone of zombie games. I think most games should take inspiration from each one of these. And if you're not, you're missing out. I'm developing a zombie game. Yep, I'm committing to one. I've said this 100 times, but I'm actually doing it. And looking at all this stuff makes me want to take inspiration from the greats. The storytelling in this stuff is next level. The environmental storytelling, the regular linear storytelling, the basic arcadey gameplay, all that stuff. The deeper melee combat of Dying Light, the arcadey gameplay of Zombies and Left 4 Dead, all this stuff. These games are amazing. So if I say anything against these games, understand that I love all of them. They are some of my favorite games ever created. I will keep replaying them till the end of my days. I also played a lot of these games at different periods of time in my life. They have very significant meanings to me. And I kind of grew up, like, when I first started with Cod Zombies, I was probably 10. Left 4 Dead, maybe a little older. And then Dying Light, I was 18 when that game entered my my frickin' peripheral vision. I love that game. And honestly, it was during an era when I was getting tired of gaming, 2018. That's when I played it. I was 3 years late to the game. And man, did I find a gem. And thank the Lord I did, quite literally. But still, I can't get over these games. And I hope that if you listen to this, give them a shot, man. Go to Steam or whatever thing you're playing on, because who cares? It's just a piece of plastic that you play games on. Obviously, I prefer PC gaming. I'm biased, but still, play these games any way you can. Seriously. They are some of the best zombie games you'll ever play, and I think they won't be topped for decades to come. See, these games actually hold up. And maybe in a future episode, I can talk about games that don't hold up, because I do love nostalgia, and I think these games deserve to be remembered. But there are some games that I played that do not deserve to be remembered, that are extremely clunky and have actual dated mechanics. These games were able to stand the test of time, and that's truly special. And I thank these developers and God, yes, I believe in him, that this stuff happened. So, God bless, people. I'll see you later. Stay safe. Have a good week. This was a blast of an episode to make, and there will not be nearly as long of a hiatus for the next one.